The first time I saw the woman in the window, she was standing in a house that had been empty for 11 years. It was 2:13 in the morning, and Greyford was wearing rain like an old confession. The house stood at the end of Bellwether Street, beyond a rusted chain-link fence and a row of dead sycamores. Its windows were black. Its porch had collapsed on one side. A red notice from the city warned that the building was unsafe, condemned, and scheduled for demolition. And yet, in the second-floor window, a woman stood perfectly still. She wore a red coat. Her face was pale in the weak light from the street lamp. Dark hair fell to her shoulders. Both hands rested against the glass. She was looking directly at me. The woman beside me grabbed my sleeve. "That's her," she whispered. "That's the woman everyone keeps seeing." Her name was Elena Reed, 34 years old, night nurse at St. Vincent's. Sober, exhausted, and too frightened to be lying. I had met her less than 20 minutes earlier, when she walked into my office dripping rainwater onto the floor and told me that a dead woman was watching people from abandoned houses. I did not believe in ghosts. Greyford had enough living people willing to do terrible things without bringing the dead into it. Still, I watched the window. The woman did not move. I stepped through a gap in the fence. Elena caught my arm again. "Mr. Hayes, don't. If she is real, she may need help. And if she isn't, then I'll finally have something interesting to put on my business card." That did not make her smile. The mud pulled at my shoes as I crossed the yard. The front steps groaned beneath my weight. Someone had broken the plywood covering the door and leaned it against the wall. I took out my flashlight and went inside. The smell hit first. Wet plaster, mold, old wood, something metallic beneath it all. The hallway was narrow and stripped to the studs. Rain tapped through holes in the roof. My light moved over torn wallpaper and black scorch marks that climbed one wall like frozen smoke. I called out. No answer. The stairs complained as I climbed. At the top, the corridor turned left. The room with the window was at the end. The door stood open. I moved slowly. The room was empty. No woman, no red coat. Only broken glass, damp floorboards, and an old wooden chair facing the window. I crossed to it and looked down. Elena stood by the fence, staring up at me. I checked the closet. Nothing. The room had one door and no fire escape. The windows were nailed shut from the inside. The plaster beneath them was thick with dust. Then my flashlight found the footprints. Not on the floor, on the wall. Small, muddy marks climbed beside the window, one above the other, all the way to the ceiling. I stared at them for a long moment. Then I heard Elena scream. I ran downstairs. She was backing away from the house, one hand over her mouth. Her eyes were fixed on the building next door. A woman in a red coat stood in its upstairs window. The two houses were separated by 30 yards of open ground. There was no way anyone had crossed between them without being seen. By the time I reached the second house, the woman was gone. But this time, the room was not empty. A man was sitting beneath the window. His back rested against the wall. His head leaned to one side. A dark line of blood ran from his ear to his collar. He had been dead less than an hour. On the wall behind him, written in black paint, were 6 addresses. 5 had been crossed out, The 6th was not. 14 Marin Avenue. Below it, someone had written a date. Tomorrow. The dead man's name was Ellis Ward. He had spent 27 years as a building inspector for the city of Greyford. He had retired 6 months earlier with a pension, a bad heart, and according to his neighbors, no enemies worth mentioning. The police did not believe that last part. Neither did I. Detective Lena Ortiz arrived before dawn. She found me standing under the porch roof while the rain ran from the gutters in sheets. Ortiz was one of the few people in Greyford who could look tired and dangerous at the same time. "You always find the strangest bodies," she said. "I have a talent. You have a problem. That too." She looked past me at Elena, who sat inside an ambulance with a blanket around her shoulders. "She says the woman moved from one house to another." "She did. You saw her?" "I saw someone." "That is not the same thing." "No, it rarely is." Ortiz held up a clear evidence bag. Inside was a photograph recovered from Ward's coat. A woman stood in front of a brick apartment building. Dark hair, pale face, red coat. The photograph was old, at least 15 years, judging by the print and the cars in the background. On the back, someone had written a name, Clara Wren. Ortiz watched my face. "You know her?" "No." "She disappeared in 2009. Body found?" "No body, no arrest, no useful witnesses. And now people are seeing her in windows. That's what the local news will say by breakfast." "Was she wearing the red coat when she vanished?" Ortiz nodded. "Of course she was. Greyford loved a ghost story. It allowed the city to treat murder as folklore." By 9 in the morning, 3 reporters had gathered outside Bellwether Street. By 10, someone had uploaded a shaky video of the woman in the window. By noon, the phrase, "the Red Window Woman," had begun to circulate online. The video showed almost nothing. A pale shape behind dirty glass, a flash of red, a face too blurred to identify, but the comments were full of certainty. Ghost, hoax, omen. One person claimed to have seen her 2 nights earlier at an abandoned school on Parker Road. Another said she had appeared in the old Kessler boarding house near the river. A third posted a photograph from 6 days earlier. The image was clearer. The same face, the same red coat, the same still posture. I printed the photograph and placed it beside the one found on Ellis Ward. They were not similar. They were identical. Not merely the coat or the hair. The woman in the recent image had Clara Wren's face. I spent the afternoon learning how Clara had vanished. She had been 29, freelance photographer, occasional contributor to the Greyford Ledger. She documented condemned neighborhoods, illegal evictions, suspicious fires, and the quiet ways poor people disappeared when property values began to rise. Her last major project concerned a redevelopment company called North Vale Urban Renewal. The name sounded charitable. It was not. North Vale bought damaged buildings cheaply, secured demolition permits through the city, and replaced them with luxury apartments. Most of the properties had one thing in common. Before North Vale purchased them, they had suffered fires. Small fires at first, then larger ones, often at night, often shortly after tenants refused to leave. Clara believed the fires were deliberate. 2 weeks before she vanished, she told an editor she had photographs proving it. The photographs were never published. Her camera was found in her apartment with the memory card missing. The police concluded that she had likely left Greyford voluntarily. People said that when there was no body and no one important wanted questions. I found her old editor in a retirement home on the east side. His name was Martin Hale. He was 81 and spoke with the careful patience of a man who had spent his life correcting other people's sentences. Clara did not leave, he told me. She was afraid, but she was not running. Who was she afraid of? Everyone connected to North Vale. Names. He hesitated. Malcolm Thorne owned the company. Ellis Ward signed many of the inspection reports. Harlan Creed was a fire investigator then. Daniel Rusk handled the legal work. City Attorney Daniel Rusk? He was younger then. He is still powerful now. That is what younger men become when no one stops them. Martin looked toward the window. She came to me the night before she disappeared. She said the photographs were hidden. Where? She would not tell me. She said, "Buildings remember what people do inside them." I thought she was being poetic. Was she? Clara was never poetic when she was frightened. He opened a drawer and removed a yellow envelope. Inside was a contact sheet from a roll of film. Most of the frames showed burned houses. In the final three, a black sedan was parked behind one of them. A man stood beside the car. The image was too small to identify him clearly, but his posture was rigid and his hair light. On the back of the contact sheet, Clara had written 6 addresses. They matched the 6 addresses painted behind Ellis Ward's body. 5 crossed out, 1 remaining. 14 Marin Avenue. I asked Martin where he had gotten it. Clara mailed it to me the morning she disappeared. I never showed the police. Why? Because one of the men in those photographs worked for the city, and another advised the police commissioner. Fear can preserve a secret better than loyalty. It can also preserve a killer. At 6 that evening, I drove to 14 Marin Avenue. The address belonged to a narrow 3-story house wedged between a laundromat and an empty lot. Boards covered the lower windows. The city notice on the door was new. Demolition scheduled in 4 days. Ortiz was already there. She leaned against an unmarked car with 2 uniformed officers nearby. "You were going to come alone," she said. "I enjoy disappointing you. You enjoy surviving accidentally." She showed me the warrant. The police had searched Ellis Ward's apartment. They found newspaper clippings about Clara Wren, a burner phone, and $7,000 in cash. "Blackmail?" I asked. "Maybe. He called someone at 11:47 last night. Number belongs to Daniel Rusk's private office." Rusk says? He was asleep. Powerful men sleep through remarkable things. Ortiz glanced at the house. "We wait until dark." "Why?" "Because our woman only appears at night. She appeared for the cameras in 3 separate places. She may prefer an audience." At 8:30, the laundromat closed. At 9, the street emptied. At 9:17, a light appeared in the 3rd-floor window. The building had no electricity. A figure moved behind the glass. Red coat, dark hair. Ortiz swore under her breath. The officers entered through the front. I circled toward the alley. The rear door opened. A woman ran out. She was fast, but fear makes people careless. Her boot caught on a broken step, and she fell hard on one knee. I reached her before she could stand. She turned and raised a small canister of pepper spray. "Don't," I said. She froze. Up close, she looked even more like Clara Wren, but she was younger, 25, perhaps 26. Her eyes were not frightened. They were furious. Ortiz came through the door with her weapon drawn. Hands where I can see them. The woman slowly raised them. Her name was Anna Wren, Clara's daughter. She had been 11 when her mother disappeared. The police had never mentioned a daughter in the public reports because Anna had been sent to live with relatives in Oregon, and her grandmother had changed her surname. 3 months earlier, Anna had returned to Greyford. She had spent the years since her mother vanished becoming an investigative researcher, and she had been the woman in the windows, not every time, but enough. Ortiz questioned her in the station while I watched through the glass. Anna admitted using the red coat. It had belonged to her mother. She admitted entering condemned buildings. She admitted appearing in windows deliberately. "What were you trying to do?" Ortiz asked. "Make them look." "Who?" "The men who killed her." "You know who killed your mother?" "I know who covered it up." "That is not the same thing. It becomes the same thing when the cover-up lasts 17 years. Anna explained the addresses. Clara had hidden evidence in 6 buildings connected to North Vale. She had used details only Anna would understand. A nursery mural, a broken staircase, a blue tile fireplace, a room with a painted moon. When Anna received her mother's belongings after her grandmother died, she found a notebook with references to those places. She returned to Greyford and searched them one by one. At each house, she stood in the window wearing Clara's coat. "Why?" Ortiz asked. "Because I wanted them to know she had come back." "Who is them?" "Ellis Ward, Harlan Creed, Malcolm Thorne, Daniel Rusk." "And did they?" "They began following me after the second house." "Did Ward contact you?" "Yes." "When?" "Yesterday morning." "What did he say?" "He said he wanted to help. He told me to meet him at Bellwether Street." "And when you arrived?" "He was already dead." "You ran." "I saw someone leaving through the back." "Who?" "I couldn't see his face." "Convenient." Anna leaned forward. "I did not kill him." "Why move to the second house?" "I didn't." The room went quiet. Ortiz looked toward the glass. "So did I." Anna continued. "I was in the first house. I heard a scream outside. I came downstairs and saw police lights at the end of the street. I left through the back. I stepped into the interview room. You were the woman Elena and I saw in the first window." "Yes." "But not the second." "No." "Then someone else wore the coat." Anna looked down at herself. The red coat she had been arrested in was old, frayed, and darkened by rain. I remembered the second figure. The color had looked cleaner, brighter, a copy. Someone had not merely used Anna's plan. Someone had prepared for it. The autopsy placed Ellis Ward's death at approximately 1:30 in the morning. Anna's phone records showed she arrived near Bellwether Street at 1:56. She could not have killed him. Ortiz released her the next morning, but she was not satisfied. Neither was I. Ward had been struck once behind the ear with a narrow, heavy object. No defensive wounds. He knew the killer. Black paint from the address list was found beneath his fingernails. He had written at least part of it himself. That changed the meaning. The addresses were not a message from the killer. They were a dying warning. The 6th address was next. But next for whom? I visited Malcolm Thorne at the headquarters of North Vale. The company occupied the top 3 floors of a glass tower built where a public housing complex had once stood. Thorne was 70, silver-haired, and expensive in a way that made age look like a choice. He smiled when I entered. "Walter Hayes, I wondered when you would come." "You know me?" "Greyford is a small city, if one owns enough of it." "I'm asking about Clara Wren." His smile did not change. "A tragic young woman. You called her dangerous in a deposition. She accused my company of arson. Was she wrong?" "Yes." "Ellis Ward is dead." "I heard. He called Daniel Rusk shortly before he died." "Then perhaps you should speak to Daniel." "I will." Thorne walked to the window. "People are frightened by stories, Mr. Hayes. Ghosts, curses, women in red coats. But cities are not haunted. They are merely redeveloped. Tell that to the people buried under them." His jaw tightened. There it was. Not guilt, annoyance. Powerful men rarely fear accusation. They fear inconvenience. "Did you know Anna Wren had returned?" I asked. "I know now." "Did you have her followed?" "No." "You're lying." He turned back to me. "Be careful." "Is that advice?" "It is the only kindness I intend to offer." Harlan Creed was easier to find. He lived above a closed hardware store in South Greyford and drank at noon with the curtains shut. Creed had been a fire investigator when Clara disappeared. 3 years later, he resigned after evidence went missing from another arson case. He opened the door holding a revolver. His hand shook. "Put it down," I said. "Did Rusk send you?" "No." "Thorne?" "No." "Then get out. Ellis Ward is dead." The revolver lowered slightly. Creed's face collapsed. "How?" "Someone hit him behind the ear. He said he was going to talk." "To Anna?" "To all of you." Creed looked past me into the hallway. "They're cleaning it up." "Who?" He shut the door. I heard the lock turn. 10 seconds later, glass shattered inside the apartment. I kicked the door open. Creed was on the floor beneath the window. A bullet had struck the wall above him. Across the alley, a dark figure moved along the roof of the opposite building. I went after him. Down 2 flights of stairs, through the rear door, up a fire escape slick with rain. By the time I reached the roof, the shooter was gone. But he had left something behind. A length of black cord. At one end was a metal climbing hook, the same narrow width as the wound behind Ellis Ward's ear. Not a weapon designed to kill. A tool. Someone had been moving through abandoned buildings without using doors. The muddy footprints on the wall at Bellwether Street had not climbed to the ceiling. They had descended from it. The woman in the second house had entered from above. I returned to Creed's apartment. He sat on the floor, breathing hard. "That bullet was a warning," I said. "If they wanted you dead, you would be." He laughed once. "You don't know Daniel." "So it was Rusk." Creed said nothing. I crouched in front of him. "Clara found proof of the fires. Ellis helped cover the inspections. You changed the reports. Thorne paid for it. Rusk made the problems disappear." Creed's eyes filled with something that might once have been shame. "It started with one building." "Which one?" Harper House. North Vale wanted the block. 2 tenants refused to leave. Thorne said the property had become unsafe. So you made it unsafe. I didn't set the fire. Who did? Creed looked at me. Daniel arranged people. People? Men who never appeared on payroll. Was anyone killed? A squatter. We didn't know he was inside. You covered it up? Yes. And Clara photographed the men? Yes. What happened to her? Creed closed his eyes. She called Ellis. Said she had copies. Said if anything happened to her, the evidence would surface. But it didn't. No. Why? Because Daniel found her first. The room seemed to grow quieter. Did he kill her? I don't know. You know enough. Creed stood slowly and walked to a cabinet. From behind a stack of old magazines, he removed a cassette tape. She recorded us. Who? Clara. At the old Marrow Street house. She hid a recorder in the wall. Ellis found it years later during an inspection. Why didn't he give it to police? Because his voice is on it. Mine too. And Rusk? Creed nodded. Ward kept the tape as insurance. Why give it to you? He thought Rusk would search his apartment. The cassette was unlabeled. Creed handed it to me. Before I could take it, the lights went out. A red glow appeared across the alley. In the window of the opposite building stood the woman in the red coat. Creed made a sound like a child trying not to scream. Then the window behind him exploded. The second shot hit him in the chest. I pulled him down and fired toward the opposite roof. The red figure vanished. Creed was alive when the ambulance arrived. Barely. The cassette was gone. Someone had entered through the back during the confusion. Someone who knew exactly what we had. I called Anna. She did not answer. I called again. Nothing. At her apartment, the door stood open. Inside, the furniture had been overturned. Clara's notebooks were scattered across the floor. A framed photograph lay broken near the kitchen. Anna was gone. On the wall, in black paint, someone had written one address. 14 Marin Avenue had been crossed out. Below it was a 7th. 208 Marrow Street. Midnight. It was not on Clara's original list. That meant the killer had added it. A trap. Or an invitation. Daniel Rusk's office occupied a restored courthouse downtown. He met me in a conference room lined with law books no one had opened in years. Rusk was 59, tall, fair-haired, though most of it had turned white. His suit was dark. His manner was calm. Calm people are not always innocent. Sometimes they simply rehearsed longer. You have been busy, he said. So have you. I assume this concerns Ellis and Clara Wren. He folded his hands. Clara's disappearance was investigated. Poorly. That is an opinion. Ellis called you before he died. He was distressed. About what? The woman appearing in the windows. You believed she was Clara. Of course not. Then why were you distressed? His eyes sharpened. I was not. Ellis wrote Marrow Street before he died. That was a lie, but it landed. Rusk's fingers tightened once. A small movement. Enough. What is at 208 Marrow Street? I asked. An abandoned property. Connected to North Vale? Many abandoned properties were. Connected to Clara? I would not know. You knew her. I met her twice. You threatened to sue her. She published false allegations. She recorded you. The room changed. Rusk did not move, but the mask slipped at the edges. You should be careful with accusations, Mr. Hayes. People keep telling me that. Because you mistake persistence for protection. I stood. Where is Anna Wren? I have no idea. If she dies, you will not be able to bury this one. He smiled. Cities bury things every day. On my way out, I noticed a framed photograph in the hall. A charity gala 17 years earlier. Malcolm Thorne stood in the center, Ellis Ward beside him, Harlan Creed near the edge. Daniel Rusk stood behind them. On his lapel was a silver pin shaped like a tower. I had seen the same shape that morning, pressed into the dust on Anna's apartment floor. A small impression near the open window. He had been there. But that was not proof. Not yet. At 10:40, Ortiz called. Harlan Creed had regained consciousness. He had given a statement. Daniel Rusk had ordered the Harper House fire. Ellis Ward had falsified the inspection. Malcolm Thorne had paid them both. And Clara Wren had confronted Rusk at 208 Marrow Street the night she vanished. Creed says the house had a sealed basement room, Ortiz told me. North Vale used it to store documents before demolition. Was it searched? Not in 2009. The property changed ownership twice. Who owns it now? A pause. Rusk Holdings. Of course. Powerful men often hide evidence inside legal paperwork because no one thinks to dig through both. We drove to Marrow Street with 3 units. The house was a black shape beneath a dead street lamp. No lights. No movement. The front door was unlocked. Inside, candles burned along the hallway floor. A red coat hung from the banister. Ortiz touched it. Still warm. We split up. The house had been stripped nearly bare. Plastic sheeting covered the walls. Dust hung in the air. Upstairs, we found a room arranged like a stage. A chair faced the window. A portable light stood behind it. Beside the chair was a wig, makeup, and a second red coat. The illusion was simple. From the street, the backlight erased detail. Anyone with the right coat and hair could become Clara. A rope ran through a hole in the ceiling to the roof. That was how the figure moved between houses without crossing the ground. But the woman in the window had never been the real trick. The trick was making everyone look up. While people watched the window, someone else moved below. We found the basement door behind the kitchen. It was sealed with new screws. Ortiz removed them with a pry bar. The stairs led down into darkness. At the bottom was a concrete wall. Fresh paint. No door. But the house plans showed a room behind it. We broke through. The smell came first. Earth. Rot. Old fire. Then our lights found Anna. She sat tied to a chair, a strip of tape across her mouth. She wore her mother's red coat. Daniel Rusk stood behind her with a gun. "Stop there," he said. Ortiz raised her weapon. Rusk pressed the gun to Anna's temple. "No closer." I looked around the room. Metal shelves, old file boxes, a rusted furnace, a section of floor where the concrete had been broken recently. Beside it lay a human skull. Clara Wren had been in the house for 17 years. Anna saw me looking. Tears ran down her face, but she did not make a sound. Rusk's voice remained calm. "You brought police. You invited us. I invited you. Why? Because you have something that belongs to me. The cassette? His eyes narrowed, so he did not know it was gone. Interesting. I don't have it, I said. Creed gave it to you. Someone took it. Do not play games. Malcolm Thorne took it. That was another lie, but this one frightened him. Rusk glanced toward the stairs, only for a second. Anna moved. She drove her heel down on his foot and threw her head backward into his face. The gun fired. The bullet struck the ceiling. Ortiz rushed forward. Rusk shoved Anna aside and disappeared behind the furnace. A hidden passage opened into the adjoining basement. I followed. The tunnel was narrow, lined with brick, and old enough to predate the house. It led beneath the alley to another condemned property. Rusk knew the buildings because he had owned them. He had not needed to cross open ground. He had built his ghost story inside the bones of the neighborhood. I emerged into a cellar filled with smoke. He had started a fire. Flames climbed a stack of old newspapers near the stairs. Rusk was halfway up when I caught his coat. He turned and struck me with the gun. Light flashed behind my eyes. I fell against the railing. He raised the weapon again. Then Anna appeared at the bottom of the stairs. She held the metal climbing hook, the same tool used to kill Ellis Ward. Rusk looked at her. For the first time, his calm was gone. You look just like her, he said. Anna's hands shook. Did she beg? Rusk smiled. No. Anna lifted the hook. I saw what she wanted. For 17 years, men had told her to wait for evidence, to trust procedure, to accept uncertainty. Now her mother's killer stood 5 steps above her. No one would have blamed her. That was the danger. Anna, I said. She did not look at me. He killed her. Yes. He buried her here. Yes. He was going to do the same to me. Yes. Her grip tightened. Then move. No. Rusk laughed softly. She came here with a camera and thought truth made her untouchable. People like her always make that mistake. Anna took 1 step upward. I stood between them. Truth did not make her untouchable, I said. It made you spend 17 years waiting for the walls to open. Rusk raised the gun. Ortiz fired from the tunnel entrance. The shot struck his shoulder. He collapsed against the stairs. The gun fell into the fire. Anna lowered the hook. Sirens filled the street above us. The fire department arrived before the flames spread beyond the basement. Daniel Rusk survived. Men like him often do. They mistake survival for victory. Malcolm Thorne was arrested the next morning on charges related to conspiracy, bribery, obstruction, and the Harper House fire. Harlan Creed accepted a deal in exchange for testimony. Ellis Ward's burner phone contained recordings of his calls with both men. The cassette was found 2 days later. Not with Rusk, not with Thorne. Inside the lining of Anna's red coat. Creed had slipped it there during the confusion in his apartment. Perhaps it was the first honest thing he had done in years. The tape contained Clara's voice, Rusk's voice, Ward's, Creed's, and faintly in the background, Malcolm Thorne, ordering them to solve the problem before the city inspectors returned. It was enough. More than enough. Clara's remains were recovered from the basement at Marrow Street. The medical examiner found a fracture at the base of her skull, consistent with the climbing hook. Rusk had kept the tool. Some killers keep trophies. Others keep practical objects because they believe the past has become harmless. Anna buried her mother on a cold morning in October. There were no reporters, no crowds. Only a few people who had known Clara, a police detective who pretended not to cry, and a private investigator who had spent most of his life learning that closure was usually smaller than people hoped. After the service, Anna stood beside me beneath the bare trees. "Why did he wear the coat?" she asked. "To make Ellis believe you had killed him." But Ellis knew I wasn't there yet. Rusk did not need Ellis to believe it for long. He needed us to believe it afterward. And the addresses? Ward wrote them because he knew Rusk was cleaning up everyone connected to Clara. The houses were not just evidence sites, they were witnesses. Anna looked toward her mother's grave. "Buildings, remember?" "Yes." She used to say that. She was right. Anna folded the red coat over her arm. For a moment, in the gray light, she looked exactly like the woman from the old photograph. Then she turned away, and the resemblance disappeared. That evening, I drove past Bellwether Street. The city had postponed the demolition. Rain had begun again. The windows were dark. No woman stood behind the glass. No pale face. No red coat. Just an empty room, an old chair, and the reflection of passing headlights. People would keep telling the story. They would say Clara Wren returned from the dead to reveal her killers. They would say she appeared in 6 windows across Greyford. They would say the last man who saw her heard footsteps on the ceiling. They would be wrong. The dead do not return. Not in the way people want. They return in photographs, in recordings, in the fear of guilty men, in daughters who refuse to stop asking questions. And sometimes, if a city has buried enough truth inside its walls, the dead return when someone finally decides to tear those walls open.